Hi guys, so I'm going to talk to you today about model making specifically within the design process, and you can see my messy desk here. I'm going to just transition back out to our PowerPoint and remind you of where we are, and then we'll come back to this and have a look at the workspace and some basic model making. So what we're going to do is think about the success criteria from AQA. Obviously different exam boards are slightly different, but fundamentally the idea behind a design project is that you work out what you might do by analysing the brief, which comes from your exam board. In our case, I've set you up with working from home, teenage lifestyle, and green products for the home, being environmentally friendly of some sort or another. So those are not exam board briefs. One of them is, but we'll move on from that. And if you look at the first 20 marks, they're about working out what your design problem is that needs solving, and then coming up with a design specification. That's a list of statements that your product must complete and must solve. So those are 20 marks now, but those 20 marks are built on massively throughout the rest of the project, so it's really, really important that you get those right and you revisit them. Now I'm going to step through now into section C and section D, which are generating design ideas and developing design ideas. Now where's the boundary between those two? Design isn't one step after another step after another step exactly. What design is about doing what needs to be done to sort out the problem and to work out what needs to be done next. And it might mean that you step back into your specification, and if you've been following these previous ones, I go back into my specification, or I will do, based on some of what I find out today with my model making. The generation of design ideas is not just drawing, okay? So this 20 marks that comes here, the 20 marks aren't just about doing a really nice drawing, they're about solving the problem through designing and coming up with a wide range of different ideas. In my example, I've come up with a range of different ideas. I actually think I could go more broadly than I have, but it's a starting point. And then the next bit, developing the design ideas. In the end, you ought to be able to make your product, or even better, you should have designed it so that somebody else can make your product for you. Okay, so if you haven't given them all of the information they need to make your product, then you've got potentially more work to do. Model making is a really good way of developing an idea from a sketch and working some things out. Now, the stage I'm going to go through today is still what I would call sketch model making. It's still part of the early design process because it's not working exactly to scale. This is sketch model making. It should be reasonably quick, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a caveat on that. Let me just go through the process so far. We should have done mind maps, working out what you might do. Those should be your problems. Then you should have done some sort of investigation of your intended user. What do they like? What do they want? What do they need? What is their brand, etc. Okay, you should have done that already. You can keep adding to it, obviously, as you go. Now, they're the person that you go back to and show your designs to and ask questions of, so they're really important. Okay. Then you should have done some sort of follow-up questions, conversation with your target market, your intended user, to find out what they really want. Now that might be a one-to-one conversation, it might be a series of questions that you ask them, it might be a bunch of text messages, and it might be some further investigation online. Depends on your project, okay? But you need to have done some further investigation to really nail down what your intended user wants. Now if you're stuck at home, ask somebody that you can speak to. Ask your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, your granny, anyone who's going to visit you or you can talk to regularly, because you need to do that face to face or on the phone if you can. Any further clarification of the problem is brilliant, ideally photographs. In this case I've got photographs of where the product is going to be used and some notes. Then I've got some examples of existing products. Remember, you can't do your own designs without really looking at what's already out there. Okay, there's still some interesting ones that I haven't explored fully yet. Then you've got your specification, which includes reasons why it's important, possible testing, and what you're going to do as a result. Remember those next steps. I keep on talking about next steps. Make sure you are doing next steps. What I am going to do next. Alright? Then we come on to design sketches. Now I was doing some design drawing on a previous video. I did kind of connect them to like bathroom or museum signage. I'm still not really that sold on my designs, but I've just stuck with it for my model making purposes. So what I did do after the last video, I got some pens and I went and bought some new ones and went around, gave it a bit of a stronger outline, Still slightly scruffy drawings, but there we go. And I think I've added an additional page because I was looking at these sort of folds and slots and stuff, and I haven't quite finished model making those. But so I've got these 3 design sheets that I've explored a little bit more through model making. Then what you do is you evaluate, but we'll come back to that later on. Now, model making, I'm going to just switch my screen for a minute so you can see my desk, but there is a reason behind that. If I come onto my model making section for a minute, I'm working with really, really expensive materials. I'm working from stuff out of the recycling section. This box card's brilliant for model making. Amazon packaging is fantastic for model making, really, really good. You can work quickly, and I think even better, it can be joined really easily with things like PVA, white wood glue, masking tape and sellotape and stuff like that. Okay, so I think that's really important. So these are going to be my friends today. Not so much Pritt stick. If that's all you've got, that's all you've got, but not so good. Sellotape, it's all right. The trouble is it gets all sort of tangled up on itself. If you've got masking tape, it's much easier to use, and it peels off quite nicely afterwards. Best glue in the world for this sort of job. It doesn't have to be quite such a big packet, such a big bottle, but PVA glue, any white wood glue. If you go rummaging in your cupboards at home, you've probably got a leftover bit of a craft kit with some white glue in it, or if you've got any textile stuff, white glue, polyvinyl acetate. It's a polymer, water-based, really easy to work with. The only downside of it is it takes a bit of time to dry, which is why the tape is important. Tape is not a replacement for glue. Alright, pair of scissors. Now I've got these teeny tiny scissors here. If I was doing this properly, I would much rather do it with scalpels and knives and all sorts of stuff, but I think just to be safe and for what we're doing, scissors are absolutely fine. Probably slightly bigger than that would be nice, but you got what you got. And then a ruler. I think you need a long ruler for this rather than a short one. I quite often work with 2 rulers for bending. I actually haven't got 2 rulers here today, but I would quite often have 2 so I can get nice sharp joints on my angles and folds. I don't really intend to do a full-on model making how-to today. I'm going to just show you a couple of the models that I've made and the reasons why they're important. Then I'm going to show you a couple of kind of basic techniques, 3 basic techniques, to make sure you kind of have the tools at your disposal to do some good model making. But before I do that, I wanted to just come on to this page here. Right, now this page is actually based on photographs of the models that I've got in my presentation. All right, and what I did is I put all my photos together onto a PowerPoint. In fact, do you know what, let me show you on my PowerPoint. So I put my models together on my PowerPoint and inserted over the top of them, where is it? Insert, shapes. I added a box. Okay, it comes out automatically like that. And then what you do, I'm showing you this because this is quite important. You then go to your shape fill, or you can probably do right click and fill. I changed it to white. Let me keep it green so you can see what I'm talking about for a minute. And then to get that transparency, so imagine it was white, to get the transparency, the faded look, it was in shape fill. Then you've got more fill colours. And I remember when I was first finding this, it took me quite a long time. So here's a handy hint for you. More fill colours. And down at the bottom here is transparency. So if I make that transparency, let's make it about 30% transparent. That means it's about 70% opaque. And you see how you can see through it? That's important. Obviously, remember this is meant to be white. That's important because it allows you to do notes over the top of it, or to do what I've done here, which is to actually trace over those drawings. So this is a printed out sheet of those drawings where I've made them slightly opaque. Sorry, I've got to get my keyboard. Slightly transparent even, to kind of fade it back, and it gave me much better control than trying to do things in other artworking programs. And then over the top of that I can insert and write lots of notes. Just a little note to yourself. Notes. It's written at the bottom as well. Okay, now by doing that, if you're not brilliant at drawing, or even if you're okay at drawing but you want to do something quickly, By having that sketch sheet that you can work on, you can quickly add ideas, and you can kind of go, what about if I put a back on it? And you can add to your design sheet really quickly without having to go, oh, how do I draw it? I've got to construct all that again. You know, you've got it there, and it's ready for you to try alternative bases, or, you know, sticking a bendy stand on the back of it. You've got all sorts of options by using that process. Okay, so that's one of the reasons model making is really important. It allows you to do these sketch sheets and add them to your portfolio and describe what you're doing. Remember, it's part of a design development process. So let me just show you some models before I talk to you about techniques. Part of an ergonomics project that I'm doing with some students is looking at ergonomes and making things fit people. And I was making the ergonome, which is a little character that allows you to test products and seating and stuff. And I added to a chair design. I just used a jam jar and put some wheels on it. And I was thinking about inclusive design and wheelchair users. And so by using model making, I can very quickly start thinking, well, how would they access a cash machine or a bus shelter, or you know, how would they get onto a table? How would that work for people who are often sitting in wheelchairs? So model making helps you do that. It helps you try out design proposals. You know, another bit of Weetabix packaging. And it helps you to develop it, so you take one object and you turn it into a slightly different object. So model making itself is absolutely critical to design development. Engineers, architects, industrial designers will all do this to a greater or lesser extent, and it isn't necessarily your finished product. Let me just go back to my design sheets for a second. I'm jumping you around a bit today, aren't I? Sorry. Right. So I was looking at these designs and I thought, which ones do I think are worth model making? And not all of them were, and I didn't want to spend too long doing it. So I wanted to use my time effectively. I liked this corner one, but I couldn't really work out whether it would give any space. Wasn't sure, so I thought, right, I'll do that one. I like this one here, where it's got the two bits that pull out left and right, but again I was thinking, I don't know whether that actually gives much space, so I thought I'd try that one out. I liked this one here. I liked the curved bit, so I thought I'll give that one a bit of a go and have a look at it. And then I was going to do, and I will at some point, produce this one where it's the comb that interlocks. Haven't done it for our model, but I was also a little bit confused about the benefit of this way of expanding a base. So I've made a model of that. Now when you do your models, you make models of your product. I'm not saying you have to make my models, okay, but so what I'm showing you now is basically those products. So if we look at this one on the top, on the right hand side here for a minute, I actually made that as a little model here, and as I was making it, I decided it would be quite nice if that top rotated. So I've actually got that top stuck onto like a little cocktail stick on the bottom, and into that curved part there just poked a hole through, and that allows it to rotate. And if you remember, the whole point of that was that I was going to look at the opening and closing of that side piece, which I've done. Okay, so that's that product there. I'll change my view in a minute. Then I was looking at idea number 4, and that was the expanding component. All right, the expanding. So there's another little model I produced. Probably not quite the same scale, but again, remember, this is sketch modeling. This is not full-on development modeling. And this one, remember, what I was exploring with that is what happens if I pull out those middle bits to create an increased working space. All right, and what's very obvious is that you can do it, but if you come out too far, they're going to be very weak. So that model works up to a point. And it made me wonder whether I actually only need to open it on one side, but possibly a bit further. So maybe take that one out, but make that longer. Okay. And then the final one, which I made, was this little curvy one with a drawer in it. All right, and I kind of like it. I think it's quite a cute little design. Is it the most ergonomic? Is it the best in terms of increasing workspace? Is it the best use of materials? I don't know, but if we were looking at kind of a postmodern style, maybe it works. I don't know. Okay, I can evaluate those properly and I can show those to my intended user. And then the last one that I did was looking at this kind of expanding tabletop there, and so I created this, which again is just it's a bit of card, folds down flat. If I open it up and then bring that zigzag bit out on top, it actually works as a support, and that would be attached to another wall, so it could collapse down when it's not in use, and it can be expanded up when it is in use. So between those models, they teach me quite a lot, and they help get me thinking about materials and the aesthetics, and probably most importantly, it allowed me to produce that sheet where I was able to take the sketches and draw over them, and I could then add to that. Alright? So that's the purpose of model making. If you produce something which is really rough and doesn't show anything, it's pointless. You don't get a tick for making a model. You get a tick for making a model that shows you something or helps you work something out. Might be sizes, might be materials, might be the aesthetics, might be the function, might be the method of it working, might be its fastenings, all sorts of things that models will help you work out. Okay? And again, if you're not great at drawing, spend more time on your models, because then you can trace them off. Look, I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that I think are important. I'm going to just change my viewpoint for a minute. Alright, you're pretty good. Why has he got a record there? I'm going to just show you one object, one method that has no bearing on any of those designs at all, but I thought it was quite important. Now I've gone and found something round that's about the right size for my piece of card. Could have done it with a piece of tape, could have done it with a jam jar lid. Right, what you want to do, this is for making a 3D object, and again, if you're sketch modelling, you're not necessarily making your final product. What you're probably doing is trying things out. And I like this, and I'm going to get this done so it's out of the way. So, if you've got a product like that, imagine I've cut that in a nice neat circle instead of a potato like I've done there. Alright, if I now cut a slit in it from the middle, is that in the middle? That's not bad actually, pretty good. Well done me. If I cut to the centre of that, I can quite quickly start to turn that into a 3D object. The amount that I pull that around is going to dictate the kind of cone I end up with. Alright, so if you're not sure what you want your cone to do, or your light to do, or your stand to do, just having a circle, or even 3 or 4 different circles of different sizes, and simple circle, simple slot in the middle. You haven't got to spend ages scratching your head trying to work out what it should look like. You can literally just produce that as a product. That's a really useful little modelling technique. It's not clever, is it? It's not hard to imagine, but if you haven't thought about it, you might end up with things that are just boxy all the time. You know, you get a couple of those together, add those onto something, make it combine with another product. You know, that's design modelling relatively quick. The other one that I wanted to, or the other 2 processes I wanted to show you, if you look at this object here, okay, this has got a curve on it. That's done in the same way as we would laminate plywood to make something like a skateboard deck or a pair of salad servers or a chair. It's literally 2 pieces of cardboard that have been cut out as a rectangle. Let me show you. Let's go to the expensive Cornetto knockoff packaging. Okay, so if I have 2 pieces of card which are approximately the same size, to create that exact curve, I will show you my magic technique. I think sometimes with model making, you've got to think ahead a little bit, because you've often got to allow glue to dry, particularly if you're working with PVA glue. You have to allow it to dry. So what I would do here is to put some glue down. Okay. And then spread it around. think a little bit about where you're doing this. This is my work desk, so it's not really a major problem for me. But don't go doing this on your best table. Think about your workspace a little bit. So I've now got glue on that surface there, put my other surface on top of it, okay, and what you've got, this is bending, isn't it? So if you've done bending in science, if you've done bending in your technology or engineering lessons, as I bend that around, one side is going to stretch and have to travel further, the other side is going to compress or stay neutral. So the trick is to find a way of making that curve stay in that shape. Fortunately, Coca-Cola, I've planned for that, and so what I'm going to do, again using my trusty masking tape, is to put a bit of tape there, wrong side, so a bit on either end, and literally work it around that can. And make sure it's pressed in nice and firmly. Okay, so that's now got two layers of card around it with PVA glue in between. When that glue's set, it will prevent the card from expanding or contracting, depending on which bit it is, back into its original shape. I'm just going to put this bit of tape on here to get those two edges really good. So that's like using a vacuum press or using a lamination press. And that will hold solid. The PVA will actually harden and cause that to stay in that curve. And if you look at that object that I've made there, that was produced in exactly the same way on a can. It wasn't connected to the base at the time. And I then kind of nibbled away at it with scissors to create that kind of wave profile. So that might make quite a nice little light or something, mightn't it? Same technique, or it might make a stand in its own right, kind of held up that way. The top of it, I glued on a bit with a point and I kind of added that to it. Okay, but if you look at that box, this is probably the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. If you look at that box, it's a box within a box. And so I wanted to just talk to you about boxes, right? Boxes, if you think about any object, most objects can be made up of a couple of what we call primitives, basic shapes. Your cylinder, your rectangle, your square, your cuboids, your cones and your spheres, and pretty much by combining those you get a different product. If you look at this one here, this has got the rectangular polygon, and then inside it is a slightly smaller version of it. Okay, but the method is exactly the same, and that actually is one long rectangle that's been bent. Okay, and then don't forget your glue flaps. This corner here is very, very similar to the way I made that curve there, in that this is the corner of my Amazon packaging, ready made, ready for action. And all I did with that is to get a bit of PVA, run it into the corner. Okay, and again, you want to spread it out evenly. If you don't have an even spread of it, this process doesn't really work properly. It's got to be spread properly. So that's now got PVA in between it, nothing on the outside there. If I now close that up, squash it together, make sure all the air's out of it, and just leave that at the level of openness I want, that will then form a rigid corner piece. So when you're cutting up your Amazon packaging, those little bits that are left lying around, you can turn those into rigid structural members that you can use for lighting stands or feet for your furniture, or even just sort of an angled prop, just by layering up two corners. Obviously, if you haven't got Amazon packaging, all you do is bend a piece of card. I'm just trying to make sure we use everything. Right, so let's have a look at this one here for a second then. All I did with this one to make that drawer fit inside that object was I actually did exactly that same process. So it's the same thing again and again. I had 4 pieces of card, 2 to make the drawer, 2 to make the drawer housing. The only thing I can think of in model making terms for a Pritt stick to do was to act as a former. I put glue between those two, taped it around. I then got glue between these two and taped it around the outside of the same object, but with no glue in between that layer. So I've got cardboard, glue, cardboard. No glue, cardboard, glue, cardboard. All right, and that meant, the reason I did that is that that meant that that curvature was slightly smaller. See if I can show you it on camera. Slightly smaller, so that that one is able to slide into that one. Okay, and I then added a front to it afterwards. I haven't added a back yet, and I then added a top to that. It took a bit of trimming. After that, I put this together, and guess what? That's one layer of cardboard bent underneath. I can't remember what I had, so I kind of leant it against something whilst it was drying. So that's what I'm saying about planning your time. I made this angled bit at the same, like 2 evenings ago, knowing that I was going to attach it to that, but I had to let that glue set so that when I attached that and that together, they were already set. So that's the planning ahead that you need to do with your model making. But the rest of it is not massively complicated. All right, so that allowed me to prove whether that worked or not. So if you look at what I've done, I reckon probably here I've got 3, 4 models. There's my expanding one. Okay, I've got 4 models that prove a point. I reckon there's probably 2 hours worth of work there. That's not including letting glue dry. And I did them quite carefully. So I don't want you to produce junk. I'll just give you an example of sizing now for a minute. So if I look at how that box fits inside that box, this packaging is probably 1.5 or 2 mil. All right. To make something like that, I've got here 3 boxes, and I just wanted to write it down. That first box that I made was 50 by 50. Look at the glue tabs working together. Okay, so I've set it out. I'm not going to do a how to make a box with you. There's plenty of videos that show you how to do that. That's 50, that's 20, that's 20, and that's 20. Think about how your top and your bottom match up. Okay, so it folds up. They have to be the same sizes. Think about your glue flaps and what's going to attach to what. Now obviously this is missing a face. If you're doing your own, this is not a 6-sided shape. I'm missing these openings. So if you're looking at that, there ought to be another face there, shouldn't there? If you're making it a solid. Okay, but that folds up really nicely. In order to get my next box into it, remember that's 50. That box is 47. And where that's 20, that's 17. So it reduces it down, and that means that those 2 boxes, actually, one would fit inside the other. All right? You can't just go, I'm going to make 2 boxes exactly the same and expect them to slot together, because they won't. 50, 47, and then the final box is 44. So exactly the same construction. Now again, if you think about sketch modelling as a process, I'm going to finish in a minute, don't worry. If you think about sketch modelling as a process, I've got a series of boxes, I've got a series of components. I can start taping those together and photographing those, ready to do my sketches on them again. So I can produce from my existing model stuff, you know, I can put a front bit on there and go, well, maybe that's a little thing for pencil sharpenings, or maybe it's a light, or maybe I turn the whole thing over and look at it as a totally different product. By having a series of objects, I can handle it, I can photograph it, I can draw from it. All right. So my criteria for you guys in terms of completing this, I want you to have your design drawings done up to a point with notes on them. Remember, I say we have to have more notes. I want you to have at least 2 different models. Now I'm using that at least 2 different models. All right. So 2 of your products, the ones that you think are most successful, a model of each one, at least. Now I think you should make more than that, but I think for year 10 at this point, maybe that's enough. They need to be photographed into your portfolio in a couple of different positions. So again, let me just come back to my PowerPoint for a second. If you look at this sheet here where I've got those, if I take that out, you can see I've got 4 different photographs for that one, 3 different photographs for that one, 3 different photographs from that one. And actually they don't really give all the information. I could have photographed them in more detail. But I also think that this drawing from it is so important. And if you can see there, you can see the layout on that drawing matches the layout on my PowerPoint. It doesn't have to. I could have traced them off in a different order and used them in a totally different way. And also remember, when you're printing, you're working off PowerPoint, you can scale things up and you can scale things down. Alright, so I hope I haven't rambled too much there. I wanted to show you the importance of model making. I didn't really want to spend hours talking about model making techniques. I do want you to understand that it's an important part of the design process. It's not the end result. I will go on and I'm going to take, I think, this one, and I'm going to change it so it's got a single drawer so it can extend more. But I'm also going to look at maybe adding some different compartments to it. I don't like this massive base. It's a big heavy thing, and I think I'm going to start looking at my materials and finishes with it. Alright, I'm probably starting to get close to doing some CAD drawings. You might, as part of your model making, do some CAD as well. Alright, so good luck with that. So you are submitting at least 2 models from your design drawings, and that's a minimum. Okay, and that needs to be into your PowerPoint so that everything is kept together. And you need to write some notes that describe it. Notes, notes, notes. I didn't do that, but notes. Did I say notes? Right, good luck.